Hello, Pastor Will here for Sunday, June 13th, 2021. I greet you in the name of Jesus Christ. I ask God's blessings upon you, and perhaps even more, I ask that you become aware of God's many blessings upon you. Today is part 20 of our 172-part series. Yes, we've gone up 2 more miracles. I've discovered 2 more. Part 20 of our 172-part series, Better Know a Miracle. It may be our last miracle that we do. If you'd like to see or hear about any more miracles, let me know. I get 0 feedback, so I don't know. 20 is a pretty long sermon series. With today, we'll just go through 6 miracles today. That'll bring us up to a grand total of having covered 53 miracles. Not bad. I'd like to thank those who cleaned out the sanctuary today, or whenever you did it this week. It looks really great in here. It's really nice. Last week we started meeting again together, and we worship at 10 o'clock on Sundays. So it's very casual, very laid back type of service. Let's continue to pray for the world, and as the focus of today's sermon is on the animals of the Bible, let's remember the animals in our prayers and in our actions and how to care for the animals. Okay, our miracle today is the animals that God created and how they exist in this world along with the humans. So in Genesis 1, verses 20 through 23, God creates all the creatures of the sea and the birds of the air, and God sees it and says, this is good. And then in verses 24 and 25, God creates all the animals of the land, both domesticated and wild, and God looks at what God has created and God says, wow, this is good. I'm pretty good. And then later, God creates humans. You read a little bit further, and God steps back and says, this is good. What's the difference between the good of the animals that God creates and the good of the humans that God creates? What's the difference of that good? There is no difference. Think about that. And so in Genesis 1:26, God creates human and indicates that humans should rule over the other creatures, and humans have dominion over the animals. And what does this mean? What does it mean to have dominion over the animals? Well, to keep it in the context of the Bible, if you look at the kings and the rulers in the Bible and what God expects of them, to have dominion over someone is to be responsible for their care and nurturing. That's what it means. Humans are to relate to humans and non-humans as God relates to us, with love. The same as the male-female relationship or the marriage relationship if it's not male-female. The marriage relationship is one of love and care and nurturing. So, then we read on in verse 29, humans and all animals have been given every plant to eat. No meat is to be eaten, according to God, in the Genesis text. Humans and animals are meant to be vegetarians, and this idea is further strengthened when you look in chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. After the flood, when God says, all right, I realize that humans are just always going to be this way, and if they want to eat meat, all right, whatever. But that's not what I want. That's not what I intended. I gave you all plants to eat, and you were supposed to be vegetarians. The animals too. So, we see in the beginning then that God creates all the living creatures, and God expects them to live together in harmony. And that even killing one another for survival is not God's intention. And how many people have, over the years of human history, have declared that, well, I love animals, but I kill them, we have to survive, and this is what we have to do. And we exploit animals, and we kill them to make a good living or whatever. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm just saying what the Word says. The Word says God intends for us to be vegetarians. I tried to be a vegetarian. I lasted 42 days. I nearly died. because all I ate was candy because I was living in a place that didn't have the kind of vegetables I like. I'm a Southerner. I like Southern vegetables, and I was living way up north, and just not my kind of veggies. And so I just ate candy. And sometimes I ate Swedish fish. So we see also in the Genesis text that only animals and humans are blessed by God. They're given a special blessing, and the special blessing is to be fruitful and multiply, to reproduce. And so if we're killing each other, even to survive, even to eat, let's say, this is counterproductive to God's blessing to multiply. We're missing out on the blessings of God when we do anything that causes harm to another living creature. And sadly, in the last few hundred years, our species has excelled at causing harm to the earth and all of its inhabitants. And we've excelled so much at it that we think it's the norm. We think it's okay. It's okay to exploit the rivers and the waters and the animals and other human beings as long as we can make a buck and our stock portfolio increases. But it's a sin. It goes against the very will of God. So that's the first creation story in Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, in Genesis 2, if you read, we have the second creation story. And in this one, in the first one, God creates everything in the world and then humans. And in the second one, God creates humans first and then the animals. And God says in verse 18, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner." And so God created every creature on the earth, animals, birds, fish, and all that. And then God parades them in front of the man, Adam, the earthling, the human, if you will, the humanoid. God parades all the animals in front of Adam, and man names all the animals. At this point, Adam is still known as man, but if you look at the Hebrew, it's the little mark Adam, Adam, which means from the earth, earthling, and then later that becomes man, just like we've done with the Satan. There's not a Satan, but anyway, I'm not going to go there. And the man names all the animals. And so, we see this connection between humans and God. God is a creator, and by creating names for the people, there's this connection. We're made in the image of God. We are creators as well. And we see the connectivity between the creator and also between the community, the greater community of the world. Another thing that naming does is it indicates a relationship. We name our babies. My middle son, I didn't name him in the hospital because I wanted just the perfect name for him. And I couldn't come up with that in just a couple of days, and I hadn't for 9 months. And I wanted to see what his character was like, if he can. So I didn't name him for at least 30 days after he left the hospital. Naming is an important thing, and getting people's names right is important. All my life growing up, people would like to try to call me Bill. I can't stand the name Bill, and I just would ignore it. I finally got to the point I would ignore it. People call me Bill. I don't know you. I don't hear anything. Your name is important. It's a part of your identity and who you are, and it's a sign of respect. When he names the animals, he respects the animals. I once was going to become a cattle farmer, and I asked one of my church members who was a cattle farmer if he had any advice, and he knew I was a goat farmer. I had goats, and I made the cardinal mistake of having goats. I named them. And he said, if you're going to be a cattle farmer, you cannot name your cattle. Because if you name them, then you have a relationship with them, and you can't sell them to be slaughtered. There's a reason farmers don't name their animals. And I learned that as a goat farmer, I prefer to say I was a shepherd. Because basically that's what I was. I named all my goats, Mr. Big Shot, Dash, or others. They became a part of our family community rather than a commodity. We're all in this together. We all have something to contribute. Some years ago, I was waiting for some appointment, and I was in a parking lot, and I'd gone to get something to eat, and I was sitting in my truck eating, and I noticed this crow in the parking lot. He kept attacking a styrofoam food container that was on the ground. He kept trying to open it. He could, I guess, smell there was food in there. And he just tried and tried and tried. He never could get it open. So I got out of the truck and went over, and he flew away, and I opened it for him. And there was food in there, and I left it open. And I remember getting a rock and putting on the lid so it would stay open. And then I went and I sat on a bench and read a book while I waited for my appointment. And I noticed the crow was eating. And after a while, the crow was gone, and I thought, well, I didn't even get to tell him goodbye. And then about that moment, something fell out of the sky and landed on me. And it was a dime. And you know, crows like shiny things, and they'll collect them. And I looked, and there was that crow. And he had brought me a gift for helping him out. And that was amazing to me. It was really incredible. But I contributed what I could, and I had hands. I could open the package, and he had a special collection, and he brought me a dime. Who knows where he got it? Naming is also an example of ruling. In all the Bible, kings and those who rule are expected to rule with care for the most vulnerable in society. Most often, the widows and the orphans, those who had no support system whatsoever, the most vulnerable. And in a world full of humans, the most vulnerable, even more vulnerable perhaps than the widows and the orphans and the poor, are the animals, because they can't defend themselves against humanity's greed. They depend on humans to care for them, or at least to care about them, and for the church, at least to care enough about what God commands us so that we will act like we care about the animals and care for them, whether we agree with God or not, because that would be faith. I remember a picture from 2018, a video. I'm going to post it later. I'll post it on the Facebook page, of an orangutan trying to stop an excavator with a big old claw on it. The excavator, a big metal machine, was destroying his habitat. I think most of the orangutans are from Borneo, and as you know, humanity has destroyed these forests so they can get palm oil or something that goes in a lot of our products. We could change our products, but we've destroyed the habitat for the orangutan, and it's going extinct. And there's this video of this orangutan on a tree that's being pushed down, and the poor thing is trying to fight the excavator. It's pathetic. It's pitiful. Many years ago, when I was on my farm, I had a tractor, and a friend of mine came over and said, "Hey, William, can I borrow your tractor this week? I've got some things I need to do, and I wondered if I could use it." And I said, "Yeah, sure, you could, but you're going to have to wait. It can't be this week." And he said, "Why? Is something wrong with it?" And I said, "No, but I noticed a bird has made a nest in the front grill in there behind the headlights. A bird made a nest, and if we drive that tractor, if I move it, and the mama bird will fly away and come back, and the nest will be gone. It won't ever find them again. So we're going to have to wait until the eggs hatch and the birds learn to fly on their own." And he said, "Are you crazy? You're not going to let me use your tractor?" And I said, "You can use the tractor. We just have to wait until the birds are healthy." Caring for others can be an inconvenience. It usually is, actually. So what? We're called to care for one another. The least of these, even little hatchlings. We're called to live together in harmony and to care for one another as each is able. Now, there are different stories in the Bible that illustrate the centrality of living in harmony and caring for one another. I'm just going to highlight a few of the big ones. There's Noah and his big boat in Genesis 6-8, and we see that the animals are of the utmost importance to God. God has given up on humanity because they're so evil, but God wants to save a remnant. And so God sees that Noah and his family are just trying. You know, at the end of the cruise, when Noah gets on land again, he gets drunk and runs around naked, but God still loves him. You know, he's just trying. And God says, I'll save Noah and I'm going to save all the animals that I can so they can continue after this mess is over. And we see that God goes to extremes to tell Noah how to build this giant boat so all the animals can go onto it. And then the animals aren't just passive bystanders doing as they're commanded. They're also a part of this process, this rescue process. Because at the end of the voyage, at the end of the cruise, Noah sends out a raven to see if there's any dry land. And then Noah sends out doves on a couple of occasions. And finally a dove returns with an olive branch in its beak. And Noah goes, there's hope at last. Maybe things will get back to some sense of normalcy. And we can start living again instead of just surviving. And the animals are a crucial part of the story. Another story where the animals are a crucial part is the story of Jonah and the big fish. Jonah didn't want to go and love the people who God commanded Jonah to go and love. And Jonah says, I'll do my own thing. And it didn't work out. And Jonah ends up in the sea, and a giant fish gulps him down, and then later vomits him onto the shore. And Jonah says, well, okay, God, maybe I'll go after all. But this story illustrates two things. Number one, how valuable humans are to God, because God sent Jonah to go to the most evil city on earth and say, I love you, but you better change your evil ways. And God loved this giant city that no one in any church would love. And God loved the one man who refused to go enough to provide a way. And God used an animal to do so. The animal is crucial to Jonah being able to fulfill God's mission. And then in Elijah the prophet, Elijah had done some things that made a lot of people angry, and he feared for his life, and God commanded Elijah where he could hide, and he could hide out from his enemies in 1 Kings 17. And God said, don't worry, I'll provide for you. You can drink the river. You can drink the river water, and I will send ravens to feed you. And the ravens came in the morning and the evening, and they fed Elijah. Morning and evening. And it's really incredible that God chose ravens, because in the Torah, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, ravens are considered to be one of the unclean birds. Not only that, ravens are predators. They're hunters. And so we see here that God works as usual through the unexpected to do God's will, to further God's mission, to care for people. So God provides in unexpected ways, God keeps God's promises, and the creatures of the earth serve God. Some years ago, my dad and I were working on a shed, and we had gotten down on the ground. We were working on the roof framing. We got on the ground, we were sawing some boards, we climbed back up, and we realized the board we sawed, we brought the wrong piece up, and the piece we needed was on the ground. Neither one of us wanted to climb back down and get it. But our golden retriever was down on the ground, and we looked, and I said, hey, maybe she'll bring us the board. And Dad said, are you crazy? And I said, it's worth a try. And Dad said, Princess, bring me the board. And she walked over and grabbed the board and brought it and put it back on the ground, because she grabbed the board in the middle with her mouth, and she put it on the ground and then bit again at the end of the board so she could lift it up and it would reach us and we could reach down and grab it. She did what she could to help us. We had another dog, Nellie, Nurse Nellie. She lived to be 19 years old. When my dad was dying, she was Dad's dog. But I had kept her for a few years because Dad was at a church that wouldn't allow dogs in the house. What madness is that? So I kept her for a few years, and then she went back. And when Dad was dying, Dad was set up in a hospital bed in the living room, and I was down the hall in my bed, and Nurse Nellie would sit in the house where she could see me in the bed and see Dad. And whenever Dad needed something, Dad told me she would come to him and let him pet her, and then she would come and get me. And I would come and take care of Dad. And I know I've shared with you the story of my dog Rex, Black Lab. He was an elderly dog. He was around 16 when this happened. My son, Karis, my middle son, decided to run away from home. He was upset with how his brothers were treating him. He came out the door with his little suitcase and some sandwiches he'd made, and he said he was running away and he was never coming back. And I said, all right, but you're going to take Rex with you. He said, I don't want to take Rex. And I said, well, Karis, my son at the time, was probably 6, 7. That's why you have to take Rex, because Rex will protect you from snakes. We lived on a big timber farm, and that was nothing for miles. So I knew he'd be walking through the timber, and I was worried about the snakes. And he said, okay, I'll take him to protect me from the snakes. And I watched him walk through the trees, and he walked about 400 yards, and he sat down, and he spread out a blanket, and he had a picnic. But then he had a book, and he was reading it, and then he fell asleep. And they were gone for a while, and then I noticed them packing up and walking back, and Rex had a big grin on his face, and I said, hey, you're back. I'm so glad you came back. And he looked down and he said, yeah, I had to come back. I fell asleep and Rex ate all my sandwiches. And I just reached down and I petted Rex and I said, good boy, you took care of my son. Animals are a precious gift that God has given us to respect and to love and to care for, and they'll care for us as the ravens cared for Elijah. Another favorite animal story in the Bible is the story of the donkey who spoke in a human voice in Numbers 22. Now, this church has an interesting history. Back at the turn of the last century, in the early 1900s, there was a man who went around all around the nation, but he rode the train. There's a book called The Man on the Train. I think the author lives in Macon or is out of Macon, but The Man on the Train. And he would go, he was a carpenter, and he would stop and get off trains, and he wouldn't go very far from wherever the train let him off and on. And he would do carpentry in the community, and he would kill a family or two. And he'd kill people. And we believe from historical notes that he actually may have worked on building this building, on the steeple. I don't know. But anyway, the fascinating thing about it, what's the point you're saying? If you read the book, I can't remember. Maybe I'll have to come back later if you ask. But there was a point in the book where a man in this community was trying to help find the killer or something. And he said that a donkey talked to him and told him to do it, to help. And when I read it, I immediately thought of this story of Balaam and his donkey. So Balaam was decided not to obey God and go do his own thing, and he hitched up his donkey and got on his donkey and started riding away, and God said, I don't like this. Balaam, you shouldn't be doing this. I've asked you to do something else. So Balaam sends an angel with a sword to kill Balaam. And the angel stands in the pathway, and the donkey's going along. Balaam's on the donkey, and his servants are on either side. They don't see the angel on the pathway, but the donkey sees it. And so the donkey turns away and off the road and into the field, and this infuriates Balaam, and he beats the donkey. So they get back on the path, and they're walking, and the angel appears again. No one sees it but the donkey. The angel's in a new place, and this time the donkey turns and has to scrape against a wall. And in the process, it scrapes Balaam's foot, and he gets furious, and he beats the donkey again. So they continue on their journey, and this time the angel stood in a narrow place. The donkey couldn't turn right, the donkey couldn't turn left. So what does he do? He lays down on the path. And this infuriates Balaam, who beats him some more. And then the verse says in verse 28, God opens the donkey's mouth to speak, and the donkey says, why are you beating me? What have I ever done to deserve this? I've always been a good donkey to you. Why would you treat me this way? Well, Balaam doesn't seem at all surprised by the donkey speaking, and he gets in a rage and he says, I'm so mad at you, if I had a sword, I'd kill you. And then God allows Balaam to see the angel standing with the sword, and Balaam understands what's going on and repents and returns to God. This donkey in this story, it's interesting that Balaam doesn't even seem surprised that the donkey can talk. There's only 2 cases in the Old Testament where animals talk. That's here, and then the serpent in Genesis with the fruit, forbidden fruit and all that. When I was a little boy of around 7 or 8, I was walking in the woods, and my dog Rip, a German Shepherd, started barking furiously, and I didn't understand it, and he ran in front of me. He always went everywhere with me. And he ran in front of me just as a diamondback rattler was striking at me, and Rip took the bite. He saw something that I didn't see. And he saved me. He saved my life, probably. I've heard in You've probably read stories of dolphins encountering divers or people swimming in the ocean and encircling the people. And the people are scared. Why are these dolphins encircling me? If you've ever been swimming and a dolphin's bumped up against you, it's scary because they're really massive animals when you're in the water with them. It's really scary. They're all, oh, cute, until they come up to you. And these dolphins would be circling people. They didn't understand why. And then they would see a shark, a great white or something, and they realized the dolphins had protected them, circling them. In ancient Greece, it was a capital offense if anyone killed a dolphin. They were sacred. The ancient Greeks recognized how wonderful they were. When I think of that orangutan fighting that excavator, I think of him thinking, why are you harming me? What have I done to you? Why are you destroying my home, my family, everything? There's another picture I saw not too long ago of a man, a scientist in a body of water in an orangutan habitat, and that water was known for having a lot of snakes in it, and the orangutan stayed away from it. But this man was in the water doing some kind of experiment, and an orangutan saw him in the water and wouldn't leave. He kept trying to save him and get him out of the water because he knew it was a dangerous place. What do the animals try to tell us now? How do they try to warn us? How do they try to love us? And we just ignore them. I was going to talk about Daniel in the lion's den, but that's really not about animals. It's about civil disobedience. Maybe I'll talk about that later. Civil disobedience. When I was a boy, many times in church, we had to stand up and we had to memorize a Bible verse and then say it in front of people. And I hated this. I couldn't stand it. But I had 2 Bible verses I had memorized that I could use according to how I felt. One of them was the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. That was an easy one. I'd get up. Jesus wept. Sit down. It was over. But the second one was one I discovered. Well, that was a third one too, about reaching your arm into the wall and getting bitten by a snake. But the other one I liked was out of Proverbs 26:11. Like a dog that returns to its vomit is a fool who reverts to his folly. If I ever said that, if I stood up and said that as a verse, I was never asked to say another verse. It was wonderful. But what's really funny about it now is realizing that in my folly, I was condemning myself. I was like the dog returning to its vomit. In Matthew 15, Jesus encounters a woman, a Gentile woman, who wants Jesus to come and heal her daughter who's sick. And Jesus says, well, I'm not here for the Gentiles. I'm here for the Jewish people. And he says, it's not fair to give the children's food to the dogs. And she responds, but even the dogs eat the crumbs from the master's table. And Jesus goes, good grief, you've got incredible faith. Yes, you're right. Of course I'll heal your daughter. Yes. But in that little exchange, we see that Jesus recognizes that even the dogs are a valuable part of a family. They're a part of a community. They're to be valued and cared for. They're companions. And all through life, we see different people with different kind of companions who are animals. When I used to have a doe who visited me at least every other week on my farm. She would just appear. The first time she appeared, her little nose, her little snout was in my back, and I didn't realize it was her. And I turned around thinking I was going to see one of my dogs, and then at the same time as I turned thinking, my dog's not that tall. And it was a little doe, and she just came to see me, and she'd come to see me all the time. It was amazing. And one time I spent about a week building stone driveway markers, 2 stone driveway markers on my driveway. And the first day I was there, I heard a rustling working. I was working and heard a rustling in the leaves, and I looked over, and there was a beautiful snake. It was an indigo color. I learned later it was the eastern indigo, an endangered species. But its body was on the ground, but then its body was up and its head was up, and it would just watch me. And it watched me work. And it watched me every day. Every day it would leave. If I talked to it, it would kind of stay for a while. And because I would say, hey, how are you doing this morning? Good morning. What are you doing? Whatever you do. And it would watch for a while and it would leave. And it did this every day. Every day. Wonder what he was trying to tell me. I read about the companionship of a woman in Minnesota who lives on a lake, and she's befriended a sunfish, and they've been communicating with each other every day for 5 years. We all know about animals who stay with humans who are in trouble, lost babies, lost children, protecting them in the night, lost elderly, people in fires, whatever. Dogs who find people. It's just an amazing world. We miss out on so much of it because we don't take the time to listen and maybe to see what God is trying to teach us through the animals. The miracle that we're looking at today is God's love for creation, all of creation. It's a miracle of what it means to live in community and care for one another. There are many, many other instances of animals in the Bible. I just use these. But what they're all trying to say, I believe, is God saying to us, how we treat each other matters. How we treat all the living creatures matters. Because we all matter to God. You matter. So do I. So does that turtle you see trying to cross the road. I saw a woman 2 weeks ago in a beautiful green dress on the side of the road, and I thought, I better pull over and see if I can help her. And as traffic parted, I got up there and I saw she was going on the road to rescue a big turtle. That's beautiful. The world is more than we think. And there are so many blessings when we take the time to care for one another and stop hurting one another. Peace be with you. Amen.